Good morning. Good morning. It is now 9:02 a.m. on May 1st, 2014, and this meeting of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority Board is now called to order. Mr. Tejas, are there any public comments? Item 3, adoption of the minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of April 9th, 2014. Ms. Fenningbach let me know that upon her review of the minutes, her name is listed as Lori as opposed to Dory. Is that correct, Ms. Fenningbach? Mr. Tejas, could you adjust the minutes?
Absolutely. I'll get after staff for that. I apologize.
Yeah, just would you please? After review of the minutes, were there any addition changes to the minutes? There's a move to approve. Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Item 4, discussion and action to consider and approve a bond resolution authorizing the issuance of the authority's senior lien vehicle registration fee revenue bonds, Series 2014, in an original principal amount not to exceed $75 million, approving the form and authorizing the execution and delivery of a master trust indenture, first supplemental indenture, an official statement relating to such bonds, and authorizing the execution and delivery of other documents and instruments in connection therewith, and enacting other provisions relating thereto. So, rather lengthy item. Mr. Tejas, you want to get us started?
Yes, sir. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. So today we have on our agenda the next step in the issuance of the vehicle registration fee bonds that we discussed last month. So as you'll recall, last month what we did was the board approved the execution of an agreement between the Camino Real RMA and El Paso County, in which the County of El Paso actually is transferring their vehicle registration fee collection to the Regional Mobility Authority for the issuance of bonds. So as I mentioned back then, we would come back with all of the documents associated with that vehicle registration fee bond issuance. So what I have for you today are two folks that are going to speak to you. First up, we have Wayne Placide, as part of the financial advisor team that works for the Regional Mobility Authority, which is First Southwest. Mr. Placide is going to go through a PowerPoint, a very general PowerPoint about this particular bond issuance and explain a little bit about it. And then following Mr. Placide will actually be Paul Braden as part of our bond counsel team, and he will walk through the documents for us. So with that, Mr. Placide, if I could have IT bring up the PowerPoint, please.
Thank you, Raymond. Chairman McLaughlin, members of the board, my name is Wayne Placide, Managing Director with First Southwest Company. Also with me is Maria Urbina. She is a Senior Vice President with our firm based here in El Paso. She manages our El Paso office. If I could ask you to turn your attention to the presentation. Just in the way of history, the state of Texas authorized motor vehicles fees since 1917. El Paso, the vehicle registration has grown by 37% since 2000, exceeding population growth of 22%. In 2013, the legislature passed House Bill 1198, which enabled El Paso County to collect an additional $10 vehicle registration fee, or special vehicle registration fee as it's called, beginning January 1, 2014. The special vehicle registration fee can only be used by Camino Real RMA or other RMAs created in the future for long-term transportation projects. The County Commission Court adopted an order authorizing the collection of the special vehicle registration fee beginning January 1,
Mr. Placide,
2014.
could you hold on just one second?
Sure.
I think we're having just a bit of an issue getting one of the PowerPoints up. Sorry, Joe. I didn't realize that.
Okay. Do I need to repeat anything?
We're good, Mr. Placide.
You
Thank
good? Okay. The second slide. In order to get some idea of what the magnitude would be once that fee is implemented, we look back at the county road and bridge fee, which has been collected historically, to get a sense for what that magnitude has been. And you can see that in 2013, the total collection for that fee was like $6.1 million. And we think that's a good proxy for what we can expect from the vehicle registration fee. Just a reminder to you, here's the list of the projects of the Comprehensive Mobility Plan that was adopted in 2013, and it lists the 17 projects that were approved as part of that process. With respect to the projects that we're looking to fund from this bond transaction, there are 4 special projects called primary projects, which total cost estimate of about $60 million. In addition, there will be pre-development expenses associated with 5 projects that are primarily funded by Transportation Reinvestment Zone revenues. The total amount of projects that we're looking at is amounts to $72 million. The security for the bonds that we're going to be issuing will be the pledge of the gross revenue received from the special vehicle registration fee. As Raymond mentioned, the fee is actually collected by the county, then passed on to the RMA, and will be used to pledge for the payment of the debt service on the bonds. On slide 10, it gives you an idea of what the flow of funds will be. The bonds will be secured by a trust indenture, and the pledges within the trust indentures will be the security for the bonds. And this is sort of an outline of the flow of funds. As I mentioned, the fee would be collected, and then it would go to a pledge revenue fund, and then to a rebate fund if there's any arbitral rebate on the bonds. Can
you explain the rebate fund, Mr. Lacy?
Yeah, there's a law passed called by the IRS, and essentially what it says is if you issue bonds at 5% and you invest the proceeds and you earn 6%, that money, because these bonds are tax exempt, the amount you earn in excess of the yield on the bonds has to be rebated back to the IRS. And unfortunately, in the environment that we're in now, that will not happen. I mean, you can't not, we're looking for the bonds that have a yield about 4%. To get, you can't get a 4% yield. It's pretty difficult, even if you go out 30 years, because the way rates are today, how low they are. So we have not seen any ARB rebate probably in 4 or 5 years. But we have to account for it in the flow of funds, and that's what we're doing. And the document that was drafted by your bond counsel, it has to account for the possibility of ARB rebate at some point during the 30-year maturity of the bonds. And so that's what the indenture does. After that, the key thing there is the senior lien debt service. That would be the payment of the interest and principal on the bonds. And then we have what is called a senior lien debt service reserve fund. Normally you would put aside, whenever you issue revenue bonds, part of the security is you establish a reserve fund, which is equivalent to about 1 year worth of debt service. So if there's any interruption or reduction in the revenue that's pledged, you have a reserve that you can use to make that payment, and it gives you time to work out any problems you would have. We're actually going to, instead of funding it, the average debt service on these bonds is about $4.2 million. Rather than taking that money and putting in a reserve, we're going to actually give that money to you to be used for projects. So what we're going to do is buy a surety policy or insurance policy from a municipal insurance company that will guarantee $4.2 million worth of debt service if, in fact, it's needed. So that's something we've done, and I think it helps you achieve the $72 million in proceeds that you need. The next item in the flow of funds is the subordinated debt service. This was just put in the event at some point in the future there's a need to issue bonds and you don't have the capacity or the desire to do it on a parity senior lien level. You can do it at a subordinated level, and it just gives you additional flexibility. We have no plans of using that at this point. The next, and then there's a debt service reserve fund for the subordinate level bonds as well. The next bucket is the authority administrative fee. The authority will receive 0.1% of the revenues on a monthly basis for a 10-year period or through the construction period to cover administrative fees and costs. The last bucket is a surplus fund, where any excess money drops down to and can be used to, one, refill any of the buckets above there or funds above that are not fully funded, or it can be used for future projects. Some of the bond provisions that are going to be required are the additional bonds test. And the additional bonds test is a means of protecting bondholders. When you're issuing parity bonds, one concern is that if you issue bonds today and then you turn around and issue additional bonds, well, unless you have additional revenue, you can dilute the current bondholders. So one way to protect them is to have what is called an additional bonds test. So what that says is in order to issue additional bonds, the revenue will have to be sufficient to cover not only the outstanding bonds, but the bonds that you're planning on issuing. So it'd have to be 1.5 times the currently outstanding bonds plus the proposed bonds to be issued. And that's a requirement not only generally by the rating agencies and generally by potential investors as well. I spoke earlier about the debt service reserve fund. And normally it's funded, yes, 3 tests you go through: maximal annual debt service, 1.2 times the average annual, or 10% of the par, whichever is less. And so we will make that determination, and then we'll set the surety bond that we plan to purchase at that level. One provision additional provision you have in bond structure is a call provision, optional call. And it allows you to call the bonds after a 10-year period. And it's for 2 purposes. One, if you have a need to restructure the bonds, you can. Or if rates are low and you want to refund the bonds, if we issue the bonds today at 4, rates go down to 3, and we can call those bonds and refund them and save money that way. The plan of financing is shown on page 12. We plan to issue about $66 million par amount bonds, and then we'll receive a premium, we estimate, about 6.8, which will give us total proceeds of $62.9 million. The proceeds will be used, as shown on the bottom of that chart. We will fully fund a project fund of $72 million. We plan to purchase a surety bond for the debt service reserve fund, and we anticipate the cost of issuance could be $845,000, and then we have just a rounding number of 3.6. So we have total proceeds of $72 million, and you can see how the proceeds will be used. On the left side of that chart, just some summary points in terms of the structure of the issue. We have been successful, as I mentioned, these will be fixed-rate bonds issued on a tax-exempt basis. We've been successful in obtaining a AA- rating from S&P. Right now, we estimate that the true interest cost will be approximately 4%, 4.19, and we're projecting minimal coverage of 1.35, and this is based on the 12-month, as I mentioned, the road and bridge fees, which have been collected historically by the county. We're using that sort of as a benchmark as to what we can expect. The maturities will go from 2015 to 2044. These will be 30-year bonds. And again, I mentioned the debt service reserve fund will be funded with a surety, and those are the key elements. On page 13 is the cash flow of the bonds in terms of debt service. We have estimated that the growth will be like 1.5%. Historically, the road and bridge revenues have grown at a rate of about 2.3%. So we think 1.5 is pretty conservative. And if you look, we've only estimated growth from 2016 to 2022. After that, we assume no growth, which we think is fairly conservative. So the first 6 years, we're assuming a 1.5% growth each year, and after 2021, no growth at all. With that, those assumptions, you can see probably the third column over from the right. You can see what the coverage is, and you can see that the annual debt service is about $4.2 million annually. And with those assumptions, we achieve about 1.57 coverage throughout the life of the bonds. In addition to that, the last column on the right shows you kind of the surplus money that's available after we pay debt service. Beginning early on, it's like about $1.9 million. And then after that, in 2017, it grows to like $2 million a year. So it looks like on average, the surplus would be about $2 million plus a year. And you can see at the bottom of that what the aggregate amount of that is over the 30-year period, about $71 million. And this is page 14, slides 14. This is just a graphical illustration of what I just said, with the bars being the debt service in each year, principal in blue, and the gray portion representing the interest. And the green portion above is the excess revenue that I was speaking of, the $2 million that would be available after debt service. We did another analysis using 3%, just to see how that would look, and you can see that the third column from the right, the minimal coverage there is about 1.72, and the surplus grows from the $2 million that it was on the 1.5 assumption to about $3 million, and then at the end of the 30-year period, the cumulative surplus is about $87 million.
You also flatlined that one at...
Absolutely, we did the same thing. We good point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We made the same assumption that we did on the 1.5 growth for the first 6 years, and then zero growth after that period through maturity.
So it makes a difference of about $16 million over the life of the bonds.
That is correct. And again, this is just a graphical illustration of what was shown on the previous slide. The schedule, as was mentioned by Raymond earlier, we met with the rating agencies on April 14th, received a rating on April 23rd, and today the documents we're asking you for your approval so we can move forward. The schedule is that we hope to post a POS, which is called a preliminary offering statement, which will be used to market the bonds on Monday or early next week. And we hope to be pricing the bonds, actually selling the bonds 2 weeks from today, May 15th, and then closing the transaction where we actually we deliver the bonds to the investors, they send us their money, and you have the funds in the bank to go forward with the project. We hope to close on Wednesday, May the 28th. That concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to address any questions anyone may have.
I've got a few questions.
Okay.
The excess revenues that are generated, I read a little bit about a guaranteed investment contract. How are those excess revenues invested, or how do we earn some additional interest on those excess revenues while they're not being used?
For construction projects, we recommend to our client that we use guaranteed investment contracts, and they work very well for this type of project in the sense that what you do, you purchase securities, and we'll actually take bids. We would act as your agent. We go out and look at the draw schedule for the construction projects, determine what the average life is, and what the amount of the draws are, and we put that information in a package, send it out to potential investors. They will submit bids on that. And the good thing about a guaranteed investment contract is you have the ability to draw money as you need it, and only. So whenever the money that's not being drawn is invested, and if for any reason, which we see happen all the time, the draw schedules on construction projects have a tendency to change, and so if that happens, you still have the flexibility to draw it early or draw it later. And it's usually for the life of the project. If the construction period is 3 years, we would bid it for 3 years. And so you would have that investment for that period. We think for a construction project, it works very well because, I mean, very seldom does the draw schedule come out exactly as the engineers say. And so it gives you the flexibility to delay it or to hurry it up depending on what your needs are.
And Mr. Tejas, the excess funds that are generated above the debt repayment, which is, I believe, around $4.2 million, is that correct, Mr. Placide?
Correct.
So we have a couple different options with that. That can be used to fund some additional projects. That can be used potentially to pay down some of the SIB debt. Is that correct?
That's correct. In fact, when Mr. Braden comes up, I'll ask him to address that. We've built some flexibility into the documents to allow us to do take various approaches. Ultimately, the county would drive that decision, but we've been talking to them about potentially seeking additional projects and that sort of thing.
I've got one more question, Mr. Placide. I understand, I believe Hidalgo County recently went out to the market with a similar bond offering. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that and how well it went?
It went very well. I mean, it's a very good credit. I mean, the fact that you have a credit that's it's a vehicle registration fee, and we have a history of it being collected. So it was very well received. They received a very attractive response, and I would expect you would get the same. I mean, it's a good credit. You're a new credit. You have an excellent rating. AA minus is a great rating. And we've talked to people on our desk. We have a trading desk as well, and they think it's going to be very well received. The market is in great shape, too. The market, it's been sort of unique this year. There hasn't been a lot of municipal volume. It's been very low. I mean, normally in a typical year, we have like about $8 to $10 billion in bonds being sold on a weekly basis. This year, it's averaged like 2 to 4. So what happens is you got a lot of money out there that's looking for paper, and they're looking for good paper. And so a bond that's rated AA certainly attracts high-quality investors and a lot of investors. So we would think your transaction would go very well. We really expect it to go well.
Any questions from the board for Mr. Placide? Ms. Placide, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, I'd ask Mr. Braden to come up and walk you all through the actual documents that you're reviewing and approving, hopefully, today.
Good morning. Paul Braden with Norton Rose Fulbright, Bond Counsel to the Authority. So I'll start with talking a little bit of an overview of the legal documents that were part of the board packet, and then I can go through the ones in more detail as people have questions or just for greater understanding. And I did put on each one of your chairs change pages to 3 of the legal documents that were part of your board package. They're marked to show changes. Changes are relatively minor, but I did want the board to have the most up-to-date versions that would be approved today. So what you have is you have a relatively small document, which is a bond resolution that the board is adopting. Then you have larger documents, which is a master trust indenture, a first supplemental indenture, and a draft of an official statement. The resolution is the actual official action that the board is taking, and it authorizes all the other documents and authorizes the bond transaction to move forward. To some extent, although it's the smallest document, it's sort of the fundamental document that approves everything else, and the board officially acts to move forward. In the resolutions, there's a variety of things, including approving the forms of the documents presented, also authorizing certain officers of the authority, which are the chair and the executive director, to move forward to finish the transaction within the parameters that are specified in the resolution. And so again, that is the sort of fundamental keystone, cornerstone of how this works. After that, what you have is the master trust indenture. Now, these bonds are being issued pursuant to a trust structure, and it's being done that way partly because of the revenue source. Since this revenue source is coming in from the county, coming from a contract, the people buying the bonds want comfort that there's a third party holding on to the revenues and sort of applying the revenues pursuant to the rules that are agreed to in the documents when they buy the bond. So typically you have a trustee get involved, and the trustee will take the money in and then apply the money pursuant to the waterfall that Mr. Placide put out there, and make sure the rules are followed as how the money goes. And your bond holders have a greater comfort from that. And typically the way that's done is you have a master trust indenture, which is sort of an umbrella document, has all the main provisions that generally would apply to any bonds issued from this revenue source, both senior lien bonds and subordinate lien bonds, and it explains really the world in which the bondholders have to exist. The first supplemental indenture, which is also a document that was included in your packet, is the document by which these bonds are issued. And so they work hand in hand, they're incorporated with each other, but one will sort of stay out there for the life of any debt issued from this revenue source. The first supplement will go away if these bonds are ever paid off or refunded or anything like that. Again, this is a fairly accepted normal structure for this type of debt in the market, and it contains standard provisions that the bondholders are looking for. The other document, which was a part of your packet, was an official statement. Some of you may be more familiar with those. This is a draft of the preliminary official statement. This is the document by which the bonds are sold. It does include the list of the underwriters who have been approved or are selling the bonds. It's a summary and a disclosure of the terms of the deal. It's still a little bit of a working document because we're going to, you have a few things you have to drop into that. Eventually, when we hit pricing after the 15th, this document will be updated to be finalized to show all the pricing terms and all the interest rates and how everything goes. So those are the documents that were presented today. I can go into more in detail with any one of them, or if anybody has any questions at this point.
Mr. Ward?
I have a question, and it may go back and forth here, and I'm not trying to be the fly in the ointment. Mr. Tejas, what is the length of time for the initial projects to completion? What do you project? The bonds are issued at the end of the month, the end of May. What is the completion period for the projects that are listed, the $72 million worth of projects identified?
Well, I can't tell you that today because the majority of the vehicle registration fee funded projects are TxDOT projects. So TxDOT is developing the designs for it, they're putting out the projects, and they'll actually handle the construction. We're essentially serving almost as a conduit bond issuer for them on these particular projects.
If you had to guess, this is a
say
loaded question.
it
Go
sure
ahead.
is.
I'm not putting you on the
Sure
spot.
is. 3 to 5 years,
Okay.
perhaps.
My question only for edification, okay? If it's 3 to 5 years, why are we issuing all the bonds at the front end instead of maybe in 2 or 3 issues? We're going to be paying interest on 7. I know we're going to invest the difference, but many times I'm just curious the rationale. It's too late. I'm not trying to be the fly in the ointment. I'm just saying, why are we issuing 72 if much of the money won't be needed for 3 years?
And I'll have Wayne come agree. I think it really is a cost-effective analysis.
Well, I guess that's the answer I'm looking for. So
Because you could have dropped a master trust indenture. The first supplement could be $15 million, and you could do one a year for the next 3 years and issue more bonds. But you have to take into account raising interest rates that might take place during
Correct.
that period of time. And every time you do one of these bond deals, it's fairly costly. So it's better if you can, and if it makes a certain amount of sense. The FAA, I'm sure, did a financial analysis and came up with the conclusion. I know I had discussions with them early on, and so I can let Wayne talk in more detail about that.
just for clarification,
Thanks. When looking at projects like you have to look at the magnitude of the project and then the timing. I mean, you could you're letting contracts. You can't let contracts until you have money on hand, and so
no, I understand that, but I'm
Look,
saying if we only need $35 million worth of bonds in the first 3 years, we could go year 2 or year 3 and issue the additional $35 or $37 million. It's just for a point of discussion.
rates right now are almost like at historically low levels.
Okay.
And our feeling is if you can lock in your rate, your cost of funds today, you're much better served doing that. With rates being low, generally there's only one way they can go. And 3 years from now, they could be up 100, 200, 300 basis points, which change your cost, would also probably reduce the proceeds you get and reduce the number of projects you're able to do to complete.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was one.
Mr. Belsey, just for, just as a follow-up, if ballpark, what would be the additional cost to break up the the bond let's say 2, how much would it cost? What would be the additional cost to issue $35 million and then issue another $37 million? Do you have an idea what that would be?
Let's just look to see. On slide 12, your cost of issuance for this transaction is $845,000. Probably at least a couple $100,000, I would think. And not speaking of the interest rate risk that you would also be exposing yourself to. So you have two things you would be looking at: additional cost of issuance, as well as interest rate risk. By breaking it up, doing it in several issues.
One more question, Mr. Chair. Just one additional question. Okay, so if we're going to pay 4% plus for the bonds, and we're going to invest the monies while we're not using them, what would you project a range of investment vehicles? What would the return be to? So what I'm looking at is the difference. We're going to get 1.4% on our investment and be paying 4%, 4.4% interest. Do you have any idea on how that's going to shake out?
You're going to have it's going to be below.
Sure.
We're not going to come close to. I mean, probably for a guaranteed investment contract, we may be able to get you close to 1% or thereabout, because you're going to be on the short end of the curve too. I mean, if the construction period is 3 to 5 years, as Raymond mentioned, your investment vehicle would match that, whatever the construction period is. So with that, you're going to incur your negative investment. Your cost of funds are going to exceed what your reinvest is going to be.
And the only reason I asked the question, we've got X amount of dollars to spend, and we're trying to squeeze them as much as possible. So that was the rationale for my questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from the board? You know, one of the things in working with TxDOT is the projects and kind of the priorities seem to change, and they move up and they move down. So we've seen a lot of changes in these particular projects over the last 6 months alone. So I understand your concern, and it's well voiced. I think there's some real advantages to doing it all at one time, locking in the interest rate, not taking any particular interest rate risk, and but it's certainly something to consider down the road. So, Mr. Tejas, did you have any comments?
I was just going to mention that I'm going to find out what the timeline is, because I am a little bit concerned about the 3 to 5. I don't know how serious that is, but I will mention that the early discussions with TxDOT, the conversation was always that they would have cash up front. Neither here nor there. I think we still needed to go through that process, and as was noted, the financial advisors, bond counsel, and myself, we all had that conversation. But TxDOT from the beginning has said that they needed that cash up front. But I think it's an important evaluation that we ran as well.
Also, if I may, so TxDOT insisted that we get the $72 million up front.
Well, we were told at the outset that the $72 million for the vehicle registration fee would come to TxDOT immediately.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Mr. Tejas, is there anything else that we need to discuss prior to?
No, sir. I would just ask Mr. Braden to guide us through the motions that he needs.
Yes, what we need then is a motion to approve the resolution, the written resolution presented to the board, authorizing the issuance of the bonds and the documents discussed.
We have a motion. Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Is there a second resolution that's required, or did that cover everything that we need?
That one resolution covered everything for the bond deal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Mr. Tejas, are we complete on item number 4?
Yes, sir.
Item number 5, discussion and action on the adoption of revisions to the CRRMA toll policies and road use document to amend the process by which mass transit providers may avail themselves of an exemption from toll charges. And if I understand it, currently the mass transit providers are required to have a toll tag. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And we have a current list of emergency vehicles and others that are exempt from toll charges where it's by license plate, and we're looking at amending that for mass transit.
That's exactly right. So as the board will see in the board backup, the RMA has adopted a toll policies document, essentially. Within that, that governs how you operate your facility. Included in there are how you deal with the exemption of the payment of tolls. So there are certain exemptions that are required by statute, by way of example, emergency vehicles, fire, police, and the like. However, this particular RMA went above and beyond and offered exemptions to the public transit vehicles in our area that consists of Sun Metro and also the El Paso County Rural Transit Organization. However, when we wrote up the original policy, we said that the transit authorities would have to sign up and receive tags, and those tags would be identified within our system as exempt. It doesn't make a lot of sense in practice. So what we're doing is we're backing out, just as the chair mentioned, to identify license plates, and we'll handle it that way. It's basically a housekeeping, sort of a cleaning up item. So with
Mr.
that,
Tejas provided me a list. We've got the Department of Public Safety, El Paso Police Department, Sun Metro, Marshal Service. He noticed that the fire department was conspicuously absent, so as a follow-up item from him, he was going to check with the El Paso Fire Department and get a list of tags. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Is there any questions from Mr. Tejas on this item to clean up the exemption? If not, is there a motion to approve? Second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item 6, update, discussion, and action on prior and proposed CRRMA marketing and outreach efforts for the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes. This item came on the agenda from our discussions last week, and I believe we have Clayton Half here from our GEC to discuss. Mr. Half, welcome.
Thank you, sir. I'll be giving you a short presentation kind of outlining what we have done and what we plan to do going forward to get this both for your information and to gather any comments and concerns you may have. So we'll talk about the phase 1 outreach was really focused on making sure that the area knows about the CRRMA and what the managed lane project was and how to use it effectively. So today I'll share with you the steps taken in the delivery of that and the measurable results.
Clayton, can you hold on just a second?
Yes, sir.
Does everybody have it up? Super. Thank you, Clayton.
You bet. The outreach efforts then in phase 2 will be focused on a different market. It's not just getting our name and explaining who we are and how we are, but we're really focused on helping people use the managed lane successfully. Understanding the savings with the toll tags. I'm going to share today with you our intent, our goals, our proposed steps, and then how you're going to measure whether we're successful or not in our efforts so that we can make sure that we're delivering. The original intent, again, was to inform an area that had never done tolling and had never seen a managed lane what was tolling, what was a managed lane, and how could they use it effectively and efficiently. It was also to explain that it was a choice and not a mandate to use these lanes. But if you did use that choice, it was expected that you were going to pay for that usage. And lastly, again, to make sure they understood that the most inexpensive way to use the roadway was by using the prepaid transponder accounts associated with the toll tags. As a part of this process, we were able to use through Joe Lopez. He helped us and he leveraged some of his larger clients to give us multiple spots in both radio and television during the January through March periods when we were opening the road, really trying to focus on that area. These are the stations, as you can see on the slide, and the number of spots per focus during that time. In addition to that, Raymond did an exceptional job getting out into the community, meeting with city agencies and organizations, county agencies and organizations, as well as local civic organizations to get the word out and to explain. In addition to that, we launched a new project website that was intended to give all the information that a customer might need to be successful using the roadway. We also implemented a billboard on I-10, basically saying if you don't like the congestion you're in, come on over to our road and try the managed lane. Local distribution, we did set up at the one-stop shop here in El Paso for local distribution of tags, local payment of their toll bills. And we also implemented a buck slip within the pay-by-mail invoices to make sure that we remind them. This is something Mr. Dominguez asked me about last month. Reminding them they can save 50% if they'll use the prepaid toll tag account. The budget the actual budget expended was about $77,000 during that startup period for all of these activities. As we move to phase 2, again, we're trying to focus now more on the successful use of the toll lanes and really using the toll tags. As I did a performance metrics presentation last month about how we were performing as an organization, we were doing well in total transactions, but we were lagging in getting those folks to use the toll tag. That's where we'll focus this time. And our real target market is the pay-by-mail users, because we know they already like our product. They're using it, they're riding the road. We need to help them choose a more cost-effective way for them to use the road. So we're going to you'll see a lot of targeted marketing in this next step. So we've heard loud and clear from the customers that they want additional locations within the city. We're working with the city and the county on additional locations, as well as working with the NTTA to expand their retail location distribution here in El Paso.
Clayton, is there any update on potential locations? I know we've discussed a few at past board meetings, but Raymond, is there anything new that we've looked at to expand the geographic base of toll tag distribution?
Well, in terms of governmental agencies, I've spoken with the county through Commissioner Leon. We spoke about they have these new, and I forget exactly the term for them, but basically county facilities in each of their precincts. And I've asked them, and they will have full service abilities there in terms of collecting cash. And I've asked them if they would allow us to be in there. So they're looking at that. I think Commissioner Leon sent it down to legal, so I have not heard back yet. But that's one approach. I know that that Clayton, Mr. Howe, has spoken with NTTA. I don't know that we have an update on potential additional retail options yet, but
no, they're trying to. One of the challenges that NTTA has at this time is that they have a back office software which runs all of their account management process. In that software, in order to change the code to support some additional interfaces to new distribution points, it would require some rewriting and some, and they're in negotiations now with their provider that manages and develops that software on several items, and this is not the highest priority on their item list right now, but we're continuing to work with them to try to get this expanded. They do have an interest in, I mentioned to you last month that Incom has a solution that you can, anywhere that distributes those prepaid cards. You'll see them at grocery stores, at pharmacies. Incom is typically the group that does that. There's two major ones. Incom's already developed an interface to several of the retailers that they would be able to bring to the table in an agreement with NTTA, which would help NTTA in their region where they're operating, as well as some of these areas where they're providing services.
What would be the timetable for bringing on some additional locations? Do we have an idea what that would be?
We've been actually training an individual at a county facility. I'm sorry, I don't know the address. I didn't do the training. Corey Thomason came down and trained an individual, so I think we're really close to adding one additional location. I think that the Incom solution is probably 6 months to a year away from actually happening, but we've got to push that now in order to get it to deliver then. And then I'm not aware of any other locations that are on the cusp, Mr. Chairman. But I do know of one. Additionally, we are stepping up our targeted marketing to the pay-by-mail customers. We are incentivizing the collection agencies to convert some of those folks. Right now, the existing contract that we have with the collection agency really rewards them if people don't choose a toll tag, and rewards them if people don't choose to pay for a while. So what we need to do is incentivize them through a pilot program to where they are reimbursed for their time in actually helping the customer, not just directing them to NTTA, but actually helping them open an account with the NTTA while they're on the phone with them, so that they can enjoy the convenience going forward. Additionally, we're going to do a direct mail piece with the collection agencies for high use pay by mailers, which is to take a targeted group, those that have 100 transactions as an example, and send them a direct marketing piece to try to dissuade them or to convince them to use a toll tag in the future. We are working with Lopez to develop a broadcast schedule as well. This is not going to be as intensive as we did for the opening. It's going to be short, targeted blasts, a week here, 2 weeks there, to try to keep the name and the organization in front of the community. Additionally, Mr. Tejas will continue to meet with those community organizations, and we developed a presentation that he delivers each time that kind of spurns some questions and keep that information. And now we have the word of the voice of the customer coming back to us through these interaction points, through the collection agencies, through the customer satisfaction surveys that NTTA does. Now we're hearing back from them. We want to make sure that we leverage that information and listen to take some action and let that drive us. Our budget for 2014 is $50,000 for the marketing portion. The communication portion, of course, is taken care of by our staff. Mr. Tejas. How we're going to measure these performance, again, last quarter, each quarter we'll be giving you a performance metric. We're going to focus on these three performance metrics. The AVI penetration, which is what percentage of your total transactions are toll tag. The AVI total transactions, which is, we should see that rise, and then the total number of transactions, because we're going to be measuring against, is the community embracing and continuing to use the roadway and the facility. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but that's our plan as of today. Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any idea about the percentage of cars that are going along the border highway and then coming over to the toll road? Do we have a percentage? I mean, is it 10% of the vehicles traveling? Is it 5%? What is our total?
Are you speaking specifically about the total number,
Yeah, do we have a
percentage
count
of?
For total vehicles that are going along the roadway, how many are converting over into the toll lane? Do we have any idea about?
No, ma'am.
No.
We don't track the other lanes, the activities and the vehicles that are using those lanes, so we can't do a comparison.
We don't have any kind of, does TxDOT have counts on that, or do we have
I believe we can get that number for you. Let me do some investigating.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I've talked to kind of a number of people just anecdotally, when the lanes are free and clear, they stay in the non-toll lanes at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, or 8 o'clock, or 7:30, whatever it is, then they have a choice, and that's when we're probably seeing more usage then.
Yes, sir.
But as those lanes continue to get more congested based on I-10 reconstruction or whatever the case may be, we'll continue to see people making the choice to move over into the managed express toll lanes.
Yeah, that's exactly the strategy behind managed lanes, is to try to offer a alternative to the congestion on the general purpose lanes.
And just for the new members of the board, we have the ability to set peak and non-peak pricing. Currently, peak and non-peak is set at the same amount. Traditionally, that's not the case. You've got, on a managed lane, it's usually there's a variable or some sort of percentage difference between peak and non-peak. Ours is currently set at 10 cents a mile for the toll tag users or 20 cents for the pay-by-mail users. So it's the same regardless of time of day. But we have the option at any time as that traffic increases and as we start to see increased traffic to look at either optimizing traffic or optimizing revenue off of that particular toll facility. And right now, we're looking at optimizing traffic as getting many people to use that as possible.
Tell me if you can hear me. There we go. Do we have a sense of the pattern of repeat users versus first-time users?
We do have that data available. From what I've seen, you've got about 800 people that are using it frequently, and all the rest of your transactions kind of fall into a infrequent user, just kind of a mixture.
And the 800 will be the group that will be specifically targeted?
Those are the ones that are actually already using the toll tag.
Those are
So
toll
we're-
tag.
Yeah, so the ones that are using, I don't have the numbers yet. We haven't received the data back from the collection agency to identify who those top pay-by-mail customers are yet.
And do you have a sense of the collection status of pay-by-mail?
It's improving dramatically over last month's performance that was reported. So, but it's still during their collection cycle, so it's still pretty preliminary. But we are seeing it's moving in the right direction. The early indicators are it's moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from the board?
Yes, I do. There's a number of existing networks already by the different city representatives, the judge and commissioners and other entities. I wonder if we have thought about having our system advertised within their newsletters themselves. That's a free avenue, and so maybe we should give that some thought. Commissioner Melendez, there is a way that TxDOT takes the traffic counts. So through some manipulations, we could get that. And I would say that's important in terms for the MPO's data as well, because one of the objectives for the tolls is to reduce the number of cars on the road or make it more efficient so that the air quality is improved. So there is a way.
Any other questions for Mr. Howe? Mr. Howe, thank you. Mr. Tejas, I don't believe any actions required. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's just kind of for the board edification, and as we're going through the process, we can continue to tweak this as we need it to. I see Mr. Lopez here. Mr. Lopez helped us specifically with the marketing plan on the beginning, and I believe will be involved in the marketing plan going forward. Mr. Lopez, did you have any comments in regards to what Mr. Howe presented?
Good morning, Joe Lopez, part of the Atkins team. Yeah, I think we were able to get a lot of free media coverage when we first went out. Mr. Tejas was awesome on addressing the media, providing information. We will get back on that and take advantage of all the free media that's out there. And the first phase was to educate and make sure people understood. You raised Mr. Dominguez, you raised a good question in one of the meetings. What are we doing with the Spanish-speaking community? We've done that with El Diario and Telemundo and Univision, et cetera. We will continue to do that. So I think there's several aspects that we'll be looking at. We'll be taking advantage of the free media. The media here has been awesome as far as communicating. I live way off of Mount Wood and Loop 375. My wife uses the going to UTEP. We'll use the Loop 375 and sometimes the Cesar Chavez. But I think one of the things we need to be conscious of is that it will start becoming more of a traffic issue with all the construction. So we will come back and try to identify when those issues are going to pop up. And do the flighting program that Mr. Howe was talking about. So we'll go in, Ms. Melendez, you're very familiar with flighting. If coming in with TV of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, people have short memories. so we won't stay too long away from it, but we'll make sure that we're efficient with how we buy, and it'll be very targeted. But I think the other thing, so we have two aspects of it: increased usage, as well as getting people to convert from just pay by mail and going to the toll tax. So there's a double message. We were more like a 25% on the toll tags and more on the 75% education. That'll start changing more to a 50-50 kind of a communication. The billboard we have that we were able to negotiate at a fantastic price is still up. We're not paying for it, and still up. And like I said, that's the kind of support we've been getting from the media. We usually, when we buy television and radio in the market, we usually get buy one, get one free. As a nonprofit, we were able to get 2 or 3 additional spots above and beyond what we usually get. So we're very confident that we'll get the message out. I think the key thing is now we'll be focusing and changing the message a little bit. Our TV spots, believe it or not, were $250. That's how much we paid for production. So we're able to be very efficient and use the money for media and for other aspects of the messaging. Okay.
I thought you did a great job early on.
Thank you.
We got a lot of media attention. A lot of it came to us, and you did a super job managing that. And I'd like to thank Raymond for kind of the nonstop interview cycle. So again, Mr. Lopez, thank you for all of your efforts.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Lopez?
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Item 7, update, discussion, and action on TxDOT's award of the Border Highway West project and the next steps for the CRRMA's involvement in the project. Mr. Tejas?
For this item, as the Transportation Commission recently took action, I felt that it was appropriate to bring this back to the board and update you all. I thought we'd break it into 2 segments, really. I wanted to talk very briefly about the Border Highway West project itself and more importantly, the RMA's role in that project. Then I'll ask the chairman to speak to the procurement process, since he was actually involved in that process. So very, very briefly, the Border Highway West project itself is obviously a very large project that connects Loop 375 from roughly US 54 heading westbound all the way to Racetrack. In February of this year, the Regional Mobility Authority executed a memorandum of understanding with TxDOT in which the parties agreed that TxDOT would grant the Regional Mobility Authority $600 million. With that $600 million, then we would be tasked with paying for the Border Highway West project. In the event that the actual cost estimates, or I should say that the actual bids came in higher than $600 million, TxDOT was responsible for providing the remainder of those funds. And then we would share the ownership of the project in relation to the proportion that we each provided. So that was the original underlying agreement.
And we would also be the toll operator.
And that's where I was going next. Of importance, especially to this RMA, was that we would become the operator of the Border Highway West. And that's important because you want a single operator in a region where you have so few toll roads. We've got, obviously, Chavez, 9-mile stretch. You have Border Highway West, which is coming online with about 5.6 miles of additional toll lanes. So you wanted that single operator so that you have no confusion with regard to your users. So that was a very, very important step that we took in February. Since then, obviously, TxDOT has been very busy, and at this point I'd ask the chairman to walk us through the procurement that he was involved in and the results of it, which came out last week.
As we were involved in the procurement through the transfer of the $600 million, we were required to be involved in the selection process. So I was tasked with sitting in the selection process, kind of as this process came together. Very interesting. Back in July of 2013, the TxDOT issued an RFQ. We weren't involved at that point. Shortlisted 4 proposers, issued the final request in December of 2013. March 20th, they received 4 proposals, which were great. April 7th, they received 4 price proposals, and those all came in. So once those came in, TxDOT broke it up into a couple of evaluation subcommittees. You had somebody evaluating the development plan. You had somebody developing looking at the pricing plan, somebody looking at the legal, and all of those were basically compartmentalized, or at least the pricing was compartmentalized from development. And then you had the legal going through kind of the check the box, looking at the various aspects, making sure that all 4 proposers met. So the development plan went through and took a look at aspects such as significant work with the railroad. This will involve a fair amount of work with both the BNSF and the UP. It involves a fair amount of work with CBP in terms of moving some lighting towers, some cameras, and then the pricing proposal strictly looked at the pricing. All that came to another subcommittee called the Evaluation, Selection, and Recommendation Committee. That was all put together and then scored based on the scoring, with 80% going to pricing and 20% going to development plan. When it all came together with the various factors that were developed, the proposer, J.D. Abrams Kiewit South joint venture, scored 95.07 points, and they were identified as the best value proposer. And that was a selection that was sent up to the steering committee, and that was ultimately the selection that was then proposed to the Texas Transportation Commission. And that was accepted by the Texas Transportation Commission at their meeting in Lubbock just last week. Roughly of what was anticipated to be about an $800 million project came in at about $544 million. You had their developmental price of about $448 million. There was an option price that all of the various proposers looked at, and that was a de-icing component. Because this is a 9-mile structure, of which approximately 6 to 7 are going to be elevated, there was some concern about the icing and shutdowns during inclement weather. So there was a fixed automatic spray technology, basically, where if weather dropped below a certain temperature, a de-icing component would be sprayed out on the highways, and that way the managed lanes could be kept open. That was included for $34 million. There was also, rather unique to this project, there was a comprehensive maintenance agreement, or a COMA. And TxDOT asked for the right in the in the bid for a basically up to a 15-year maintenance agreement. So you have 5 years, in addition to another 5 years, and another 5 years past that. The maintenance price that was proposed was $10 million for the first 5 years, and then $51 million for the remaining 6 through 15. So the total contract price came in to about $544 million. There are some additional costs above that, such as right-of-way and some other things, but it should land somewhere around $600 million, maybe a little north of that, a significant savings in terms of what was proposed overall. A very unique project, about, as Raymond mentioned, 6-mile tolled, probably around 7 miles elevated, 9 miles with interchanges, a redo of the interchange at Coles, Spur 1966, executive, and then final at racetrack. So fascinating to sit through it. I found it very educational. I was very impressed with the amount of work involved in a procurement of this size, the dedication of the various offices from TxDOT, Strategic Projects Division. Just it was a great process. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to kind of cover those for you. The next steps for TxDOT is they're currently negotiating a contract with J.D. Abrams Kiewit. They anticipate that'll take 4 to 5 to maybe 6 months. At that point, the notice to proceed will be issued. We're looking at a construction of about 1,095 days, I believe, which is in the contract. After that, it's liquidated damages, I believe, of $30,000 a day. So what we're looking at is construction beginning fall of 2014 and completion of fall of 2017, at which time you're going to have a true managed lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. It's not going to be where it's going to be separate from the lanes that, like we have at Cesar Chavez, but they're going to be distinct and separate. In addition, there will also be commercial vehicle access that will be allowed on this particular project. So it will be a true managed lane. And again, they'll probably look at some sort of variable between peak and off-peak pricing. It'll be an excellent relief route for I-10 and something that's sorely needed, especially when the I-10 reconstruction starts to kick off, probably not much after this project is completed. So, Mr. Tejas, is there anything else?
The only other item I would mention is that there are a couple of next steps that the RMA will have to take with regard to our relationship with TxDOT and the receipt of the $600 million in granted funds. The first item, and actually we've got an outstanding question to TxDOT in terms of what types of instruments are going to be required of us. The one that we're currently negotiating is referred to as an escrow agreement, and our lawyers have marked up their draft that they provided late last week, so we'll have that going back to them in the next day or so. So that's the next item that you'll see before you, and at that point I'll be able to outline much more clearly in terms of what remaining instruments need to be executed and how this will all work. ultimately the transfer of the funds, I believe, needs to happen in August of this year. So we're coming up on that here pretty quick. As the chairman mentioned, TxDOT has been moving extremely quickly on this huge project, so it's been really interesting to watch. So
Extremely accelerated. Just for a point of reference, the revenues toll revenues are designed to pay the maintenance costs for this facility involved, as well as the toll integration cost. And there's kind of a similar waterfall, not near as complex as the bonds that we're issuing. That's in the MOU, go through and detail how that's set up. If you'd like a copy of the MOU that was recently executed, Mr. Tejas can provide that for you and review that with you should you desire. Because I know that was executed, I believe, prior to some of the new board members coming on board.
in fact, I'll send an executed copy out today. And if you have any questions, please just give me a call. We can sit down.
Any other questions on Border Highway West? It's the largest project, I believe, in El Paso transportation history, short of the I-10 interstate that came through, so it's significant. It's a really large project, going to make a huge impact. I personally am very excited about the potential for this project to really enhance mobility in this area and at the end of the day, give people options. These are additional lanes, additional capacity, and will provide additional options.
I did want to make a comment. I have often personally commended Raymond for his work. I want to publicly do that, but also behind the scenes, the sheriff's work and Raymond's work. There is an intense sessions that you've gone through. To reduce the price from 800 to 600 and something is phenomenal. It's a lot of savings for this area. And then also early on, I had heard that we would start construction in July of 15. Now we're starting construction this year, which is even better. This will be a challenge that we, TxDOT and ourselves, if we can match the schedule that we did with the so-called inner loop, get it done before schedule. We seem to be, this board and the other organizations that we help serve and work with, we've come a long way since 2015, some years ago. It's to be congratulated. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carter. And again, I just have to, the local TxDOT office, Bob Bielik and his group, I tell you, just did a tremendous amount of work on this, and I was so impressed with how they ran this project, the amount of work that was required, and I can't speak more highly enough of the entire TxDOT team and the amount of work to get this through and finished. So really quite an amazing win for the entire region. Item number 8, update, discussion, and action on the following CRRMA procurement processes to select A general engineering consultant, GEC, B, pre-qualified firms as part of the CRRMA's expedited selection process, professional engineering services, and C, a financial advisor, FA. On item A, I asked Raymond to kind of bring us some update in regards to the GEC. For the new board members, what's kind of involved. When I was first a board member, I sat in on the selection of the current GEC, and I've worked with the GEC very closely, hand in hand, but the new board members, I realize, don't fully have may not have a full grasp of what the GEC does for us as kind of our back office engineering and everything else, the other types of support that we need. So I've asked Raymond to give us a quick brief. Mr. Tejas?
And hopefully this is okay. I've taken the liberty to expand it into a little bit larger presentation to not only focus on the procurement that we're getting ready to release for our general engineering consultant team, but also to look at the financial advisor procurement that we will put out this year, as well as the ongoing, what we call the expedited selection process for engineering firms. So we're going to talk about 3 different procurements that we will be putting out and continue this year. And again, for the benefit of the new members and also the public. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about 3 procurements: GEC, the general engineering consultant, the expedited selection for engineering, and financial advisors. So the first one up is the general engineering consultant. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what our GEC does. The general engineering consultant for the Regional Mobility Authority, generally speaking, and normally is seen almost as the engineering department for a Regional Mobility Authority. And that's particularly important in an agency such as ours where we have such a small staff. you really need that engineering department, since the brunt of our activities are construction and design related. So they're really vital to the operation of this particular organization as well as others. But not only are they providing the design services, they're providing a whole list of different types of services to us. By way of example, I've identified a few projects here. Planning services. Back when the Regional Mobility Authority first was created, one of our first tasks was to go out and develop a regional toll plan, which really looked at the region and looked at the proposed toll roads that were identified for the region, identify them, and really try to figure out the best way to approach their development. So that was one of the first really the first tasks that we assigned the general engineering consultant. That was, I think, a very useful process. And part of that, the value of that document when it was originally developed was that not only did it identify the roadways in the area and how we ought to pursue them, but it really broke down the process of transportation planning, financing, and the like. So it was really a helpful document, and we have all of this online, or I can get you hard copies if you're interested. But it was a really good, comprehensive document for a brand new board at that time to really digest how transportation planning and development works. So it was a really excellent exercise. Beyond planning, they do design services. By way of example, State Spur 1966, the Schuster Overpass over I-10 connecting Schuster to Paisano. Our general engineering team, our general engineering consultant team, did the design services for that. They've done project management, which, by way of example, Americas Interchange, not only did they do the management, but they also handled the procurement for that as well. Project oversight, by way of example, our parking study that we're looking at, they're doing the oversight for that. And operations, of course, Cesar Chavez, they are manning the operation of those facilities as well. So as you can see, it's a varied approach. This particular group can provide any services I need. The beauty of general engineering consultants, and again, especially with an agency as small as ours, is that they bring all levels of firms to us and capabilities to us. So they have huge international capabilities. They've got large national capabilities, and we have local components as well. We've got, last count, at least 3 local firms that are part of our general engineering consultants. So when we spend $1 with our GEC, a portion of that is staying local as well. So that's important to note as well. So that's a little bit about what the general engineering consultant does for us. I want to talk a little bit about how we procured them the last time, then we'll go into how I'm proposing that we procure them this next go-round. So originally, back in 2008, we issued a request for qualifications, and because this is including engineering services, we have to go through the RFQ process, the request for qualifications process. So that was issued in September 2008. Within a month, we had received 3 submittals. And within a month of that, we were before the board selecting an actual GEC team. By January of 2009, we had an executed agreement. That agreement had a 5-year term. Through the RFQ, there was the ability to add 2 additional 1-year options. So, as you can tell, in January of 2014, we were scheduled the GEC contract was scheduled to expire. Anticipating that back in November, and rather than rush through a procurement, and because we had Chavez opening, we had a number of really significant projects that were coming to a head at that time, the board decided to extend the GEC contract 1 year. So that's what we've done. So through January of 2014, we have our general engineering consultant team on board. I want to talk a little bit more in detail about the procurement process itself. That procurement process had 2 steps to it, and in fact the second step was optional. So the first step was to include the written responses to the RFQ, and that was weighted at 75%. And that's a little misleading. I should go back. The way that it was structured is that the written responses to the RFQ was received by a technical review committee of the Regional Mobility Authority, and at that time the chairman of the board identified those committee members. And you'll see there were 3 RMA board members identified. There were 2 TxDOT representatives, which were both engineers, and 2 City of El Paso representatives, also both engineers. So that committee of 7 then served as a technical review committee. They reviewed all of the written responses to the RFQ. At that time, the committee had the ability to either score them and name a recommended GEC team to the board for their action, or they had the ability to split off into this second step, which included a presentation to the full RMA board, and that's what the committee elected to do. So at that time, when they elected to do that, we brought forth the three parties that submitted, and they presented to the full board, and the full board then scored that presentation. And then that's how you see the 75 and 25% breakout. So this was the process that was utilized last go-round. In terms of the proposed procurement process going forward, I'm looking to issue the RFQ in July. The proposals would be due in August, and we're tracking that 1 month turnaround. By September, we'll have the selection, and in November, we will have an agreement executed. And that gives us plenty of time to transfer those tasks that we will transfer. And I should mention too, I probably should have done this at the outset. The way that these GEC contracts work is that you have a master agreement, and once you have a task or a project that you're ready to pursue, you actually, the board executes a work authorization. We've issued, I believe, 21 work authorizations to date. So the way that this would work is that, and actually I should mention, each of the work authorizations have a provision within them that allow us to run beyond the expiration of the underlying GEC contract. So why that's important is that if we want to keep the current GEC on board to handle the Cesar Chavez operating activities until we have the new GEC, assuming that, obviously this assumes there's a new GEC, and there's some folks in the audience that may not like that comment. But the idea, though, is if a new GEC comes on board, we have the flexibility to keep the current GEC on board for certain tasks and flip certain tasks to the new GEC. So that's built in. That flexibility is built into the structure that we've got. So again, November we would have the GEC agreement executed. That would give us plenty of time to shift those tasks that we'd like to over to the new GEC in time, with plenty of time to spare for January. Of course, late November and then December gets a little weird with holidays. So this, I believe, gives us plenty of time. I'm also proposing another 5-year term with two additional 1-year options. And I think this becomes much more important now that we're a more sophisticated organization. We have many more projects than we originally did back in 2008, and I think the long 5-year term is appropriate for this organization. In terms of this scoring, now this will come back to you. In fact, all of this will come back to you. If you'll just envision this more as an update and a confirmation from the board that you're comfortable with the way that we're proceeding, that's really what this presentation is about. The actual scoring percentages and the all of the evaluation criteria and factors will come before you for actual approval before the RFQ is released. But what I'm proposing is actually following the process that we utilized the first go-round. And I've gone back and forth on this, but I think this process makes sense to have that flexibility in the event that the technical committee does want to have full presentations to the board. So that's what I'm proposing. The one adjustment that I am proposing here, though, is that we use all engineers in terms of the evaluation of the technical responses. So that's what I'll be presenting. But again, this will come back to you, so you're not deciding anything just yet.
And in regards to TxDOT, that's purely voluntary on TxDOT's part. If they choose to participate, that they can choose. We hope they do. If not, then we may add some additional city or county representatives. Mr. Tejas and I talked about discussing this with Ernie Carzella from the county. Last time I worked with Alan Schubert, the city engineer. So it just we'll get the mix. It'll come to the board as we finalize it up and approve it from there.
That's right. And I should mention the TxDOT representatives, as the chair alluded to, we would ask for those. The Regional Mobility Authority representatives, those are really colleagues of ours throughout the state that manage these services, these contracts. For example, at the Cameron County RMA, Central Texas RMA, Northeast Texas RMA, other RMAs that have GEC contracts, I think it makes a lot of sense to go out to them and have them sit on these panels. They have, in fact, I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but they have helped us out on procurements before. So I'm certain we were a small group and we help each other where we can. So I'm certain they would help out here as well.
So we can continue to tweak this as we get closer to the final procurement.
Absolutely, and I will bring all of this for you for decision making before we actually issue the RFQ. So that's really what I'm looking for. That's how I'm structuring this. But again, decisions will come back to you. So I also wanted to talk about the expedited selection process for professional engineering services. So very generally, let me describe this program. What we've done with this is selecting engineers sometimes can be a timely a time-consuming process. The state statute requires 2 steps where you have to initially do the selection based on qualifications. Once you've done your selection, then you actually negotiate a rate and you go forward. What we've run into in the past is that we didn't have an on-call group of professional engineers. So in instances where TxDOT funding came available, but that funding had timelines associated with it, we weren't able to go out and procure engineering services. So what we've had to do is use our general engineering consultant. And as you can imagine, some of the local engineers were interested in getting in there and being part of the selection process. So we've had ongoing discussions with the local engineering firms for quite some time, and in fact this process is a result of some of those conversations. So what we've done is we've created this expedited process where the 2 steps are the first step is done in advance. So what we have is essentially a pre-qualified list of engineers, and that's you can find that on our website today. It's a very simplified form where we evaluate qualifications, but what we do is we bucket them into disciplines. So you'll have civil engineering, you'll have geotech, and all of the other disciplines. So they'll be pre-approved by discipline. The intent of all of that is to have a list that we can go to very quickly once we have a project and we have funding. If, say, by way of example, the project had civil engineering and drainage discipline requirements, we would send that request for proposals to all of those pre-approved folks. They would send back responses, and we'd be able to move very quickly because the qualifications are essentially done. So that was the proposal. And in fact, that's what we've done. So this process was set up to deal with situations where project funding associated timelines do not permit a full procurement. We've developed a list of pre-qualified engineering firms by discipline, and upon selection, this is an important point too, the way that we structured is that we could actually go to this pre-qualified list in the event that we wanted to add somebody to our GEC team, or in the event that we actually wanted them to build a team themselves and the GEC would do oversight for them. So we maintained a great deal of flexibility as well.
And prior to Mr. Blake, we had Pete Jacobs as our day-to-day contact for the GEC team. He actually held some open houses, did some work with some of the local engineering firms to get them signed up and make them aware of this pre-qualified listing. In the past, the GEC also kind of provided some presentations in regards to the amount of local resources that they were using, and perhaps we could start that up again as we go forward just to get an idea of where those GEC dollars are being spent.
Absolutely. So the way that we deal with, and that's a good point I wanted to talk about as well, we do things a little bit differently in terms of local participation. You see, in fact, the city of El Paso is revising their approaches currently, and if they haven't done it already, they're in that process now. There's always been a question of how do you deal with local contribution, how do you deal with local, what's the definition of a local office? Do you have to have a certain number of individuals? Do they have to have done business here for a certain number of years? So we've sidestepped all of that by essentially focusing on what we refer to as local contribution. So what we've done is, by way of example, if you use Atkins, they're an international firm, but we look to the bills that they're sending us for Atkins expenditures. We identify the folks that are actually Atkins employees that live in El Paso and are paying for a home here. They're paying taxes here. They're spending their money at our grocery stores, and we put those individuals in the local contribution bucket. All the folks that are doing work for Atkins that live in Austin or Dallas or elsewhere, they're considered in the other bucket. Overhead is dumped in the other bucket as well.
I think it's important to note that the GEC is comprised of a team. So they may have ECM, Tom Cardenas and his group as part of their team. So some of that work goes to ECM. So it's not all just Atkins. It's kind of a team concept with a number of local firms that are involved.
That's right. That's right. So that's what we've done. And in the past, and we need to, as the chairman mentioned, when we had Pete Jacobs here, he would manage that, and he'd bring back, I think, quarterly reports to identify local contributions. So we need to dust that off and get that back. And I've had conversations with Greg to do that, hopefully for next month. So we'll have that for you as well. So that's the goals of this.
And that's an open process. That's not. There's no. I mean, that will always continue to be open. So at any time, a firm who hasn't expressed interest in the past can come on in 6 months or a year and be part of the pre-qualified list. Is that correct?
They can come on time. They can come online at any time. In fact, I receive these applications periodically. Yes, ma'am.
Raymond, you may be going to cover this later on in your presentation, but can you talk about the process? Who approves it? How does a firm get on that list?
Sure. So on our website, we've got the different buttons that get you to the different web pages. One of them includes the procurement page. So when you go there, you see we've got open procurements and then past or present, I guess, ongoing and past procurement, something like that. In the ongoing, you'll find this professional engineering services, the expedited selection process. From there, you get the application, you get the instruction documents, and everything is there. In fact, we've even included in Word format the document that they actually fill out. So it's all right there online. And then, and of course, I'm the contact person as well. I field calls on that fairly regularly as well.
We're talking about getting a list of approved firms. So how does that process? I mean,
Right.
Who makes the decision that this firm will be put on that list?
Right. So
How does that process?
So the application, once it comes in, then I sit down with. To date, it was Pete Jacobs, so somebody from the GEC team, as well as Terry Quesada, who works as a consultant to us, who actually used to do evaluations for the engineering department for the city of El Paso for many years, and myself. So we sit on that and we evaluate those. And I can tell you, we've had instances where a firm didn't quite make it. We sent it back with comments, and it was returned, and they were added.
And do you use a scorecard? I mean, how do you make your decision?
Yes.
They have to meet minimum qualifications?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. So again, it's important to note that process is open all year. There's no deadline by which you can get in. So that is intended to be a rotating, or I should say an updated list of pre-qualified firms. Now, the reason why it's here before you today is that the intention of the RMA is to use this pre-qualified process, the expedited process, to identify design firms to handle the transportation reinvestment zone projects that are scheduled to take place as part of the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan. The intent here really, and in fact, what we're proposing to do is we will actually put out the RFP component. As we've noted, we've already pre-qualified engineering firms, so we will put out the request for proposals to the pre-qualified firms based on a sample project. And that sample project will be a project that would include any and all of the disciplines that would be necessary for TRZ projects. So we would have them respond to that. We would be seeking teams. And those teams, and I would note, because the question has come up, what do you do when you're putting a team together if one of your team members is not part of the pre-qualified list? There's two things that you can do with that. If the team member is slated to take less than 30% of the project itself, they're handling less than 30% of the project, they don't need to be pre-qualified. If they're taking 30%, they do. However, as I noted before, it's always open, and we have a quick turnaround. Or we will have a quick turnaround as we gear up for the Transportation Reinvestment Zone projects. So that's how it'll work. In terms of an estimated timeline, and I've got subject to change here in caps, May, we're looking to issue a notice to submit applications or update firm information. And I've spoken with a couple of the engineering firms here in town. The way that it was structured was that you submit your information and you update each year by September 1. So some of the folks are starting to do that for last September. So I'll send out a notice, ask for updates, and for any new firms that are interested in participating in the program as well. So that'll happen likely today or within the next couple of days. And I should mention this is all a little bit later than I had originally planned. We had to get TxDOT review and approval of our expedited procurement process. We've received that, and they're entirely comfortable with our program. We'll work with them, obviously, because these are dealing oftentimes with TxDOT projects, so all of this has to get reviewed and approved by TxDOT. So we've received all of that. So now we can move forward. In June, I'm planning to issue the RFP using that sample project that I talked about. By August, I'll come back with the identified ranked list of qualified firms. And then in late 2014, once the TRZ funds become available, then at that point we would begin awarding projects to those folks that are on that ranked list. So that is the plan for that one.
And as Raymond mentioned, we really have two options. We could either use the team through the GEC or independent of the GEC. So it just depends on where the best fit is.
That's correct.
You know, I have followed what the city of El Paso has been going through on local companies. And I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that they run into a situation where somebody rents an apartment or there's an office trailer and somebody says they're a local company. So I hope that we have some language specifically on what will be required for the GECs, because look, I'm very sensitive, as we're all El Pasoans here, that there's a lot of work here. And there is a tremendous amount of professional expertise in this community. And we want to make sure, just like the city and the county has done, that there is competitive local participation. They got to fight for it, but that they get the opportunities to provide, it could be some design services on some of the non-major, like I saw some of the county stuff, East Lake Extension, that doesn't need to go to a firm in Houston to design. I hope we have that component in our request for proposal, and that we have, I don't know if it's required, a full-time presence for the GEC or some type of requirement for whomever is selected to maintain a regular presence, office presence in El Paso.
Right. So that's been an issue that we've been dealing with for several years. Right. The locals are very interested in that, and it makes sense. And we need to be aware of that. We need to be cautious as we develop these evaluation criteria. So what I had committed to the last go round was that criteria will come to the full board, so that the full board is able to vet that before we put any of these out. So that's an important point. One distinction though that I will make is that the city of El Paso, there was a statute that was passed that allows municipalities to award points for locals. Regional mobility authorities do not have that ability.
Sure.
So we're a little bit different, but there are ways to award for local presence because you're dealing with somebody that can get to the project site quicker. There are ways to deal with that, and we've done that in the past, and we will continue to do that. But you will see that, and more importantly, you will evaluate and approve those evaluation criteria before they're released.
Thank you, Mr. Tejas.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
We've addressed this. We've got some engineering firms that are based here, but we've also got some with a significant presence that have offices in other locations that would be considered local, per your comments earlier, not just somebody with one office and one employee. I know we've covered that in the past. So.
Yes, sir. Very good. So that'll move us to the financial advisor services. So as you saw earlier, the Regional Mobility Authority uses First Southwest as its financial advisor. In very general terms, the financial advisor provides various assistance, various services to the Regional Mobility Authority on an ongoing basis related to bond issuances, related to past and future debt issuances, ongoing disclosure and other reporting requirements related to past debt issuances, and reviewing and developing recommendations on proposed bond refinancing opportunities and other debt management issues. These are three just very quick examples of the way that we have used our financial advisor over the years. Obviously, a very important role for an agency like ours who looks to issue debt, especially with the complexity that we do our debt issuances, where we're using transportation reinvestment zones that have never been used throughout the state prior to our issuance of debt off of that. We're using TRZs in multiple jurisdictions now. So we have very complex debt issuances, and the financial advisor plays a huge role in guiding us through that process. In terms of our current FA, financial advisor, back in August of 2007, the RMA engaged the current FA. And that was the driving factor for that one, obviously, was the state's first 601 project. And the way that we went about hiring them was through the city of El Paso's then recent procurement process, where they went through to select a financial advisor. So that's how they were brought on board back in 2007. In January of 2014, the RMA then extended that agreement through August of 2014, and the intent of that was really to help us get through the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan projects. So that'll get us through August. The intent really is to have a financial advisor on board by fall of 2014. We can do that by issuing a procurement in summer of 2014 and bringing them on board in fall. This procurement process is a much more streamlined process than is the general engineering or the professional engineering procurement. So we're able to move that one fairly quickly. So with that, I'm asking for several action items, and you'll see they're very general in nature. They're really just intended to make sure that you're comfortable with the process, you understand it, and that you're giving me the authority to continue to pursue these, noting, however, that all of these items will be back before you before they're released to the public.
Are there any questions for Mr. Tejas before I ask for the motions?
Is there, you're using a sample project for technical experience and expertise. Is there an evaluation of cost in that as well?
No, and in fact, with the selection of professional engineers, you cannot evaluate cost. So that first step is a technical qualifications-based evaluation. Then you rank them, and then you go and negotiate with the top-ranked firm. Then you negotiate the cost with them at that point.
And if you can't come to an agreement and cost can't be negotiated, then you go to the second firm. But that hasn't happened. It took me a while to kind of get my arms around exactly how that works. I understand why it makes sense, and but that's what we're required to do by law.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Tejas? If not, is there a motion to direct staff to proceed with the procurement process for the selection of a general engineering consultant?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, is there a motion to direct staff to proceed with the use of the CRRMA's I just lost the motion, Mr. Tejas, so just, and I don't have it on the attachment.
IT, can I ask you to bring up the PowerPoint again?
Here,
There we go.
thank you.
We had it. Item 8. Thank you.
Second motion, to direct staff to proceed with the use of the CRRMA's expedited selection process for professional engineering services for certain 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan projects. Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Last motion that I'm asking for is a motion to direct staff to proceed with the procurement process for the selection of a financial advisor to the CRRMA. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Tejas, do we have any other business to talk about today?
That's all I have for you.
Before I ask for a motion to adjourn, any other questions for Mr. Tejas? If not, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second? Second. We are adjourned. Are all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned at 10:39 a.m. on Thursday, May 1st, 2014. Thank you.